Thank you for tuning into Literary Blend, a publishing podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Schwartz. There's no perfect recipe for chasing a dream in the publishing industry, but I hope the conversations on this show give you the ingredients you need to bake yours into reality. So let's flip the page and get into this chapter of Literary Blend. Hi friends, welcome back to Literary Blend. Today's chapter is called Writing Unexpected Genres. And joining me on the show for this chapter is a very special guest. She is a loyal listener of the show and one of my amazing author friends. Please welcome Michelle Sanchez. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Demi. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. About time. Chapter 70. Here we are,
Ah,
finally.
I've been waiting. You just have too many awesome guests on this show.
And you are just as awesome. And I'm really excited to have you on. You suggested this topic, and I can't wait to chat about it with you. But first, I would love for you to share with everyone a little about yourself.
I write Gothic horror. I am an agented author with my Gothic horror novel inspired by Edgar Allan Poe's Telltale Heart and set in Puerto Rico. Um, and it's the story of my heart, or should I say, my hearts. It's a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see where it goes. And in the meantime, I'm just working on way too many other novels in the meantime.
Yes, that's the life. Way too many other whips.
Yes, too many.
Speaking of writing lots of different things, that's a perfect transition into our topic, writing unexpected genres. And the first thing I want to chat about with you is the expected, the familiar, where we started as authors, because before we were able to write unexpected genres, things we thought we never would write, we had to start with what was familiar, what we thought we wanted to write, what felt comfortable. So for you, what was this when you first started writing? What was the genre or genres that you found yourself gravitating towards?
So when I was a teenager, I read a lot of murder mystery type books like Mary Higgins Clark, and romantic suspense stories. So always something with a murder and a mystery to solve. And I adored those as a teenager. And so the first novel I ever wrote was like a murder mystery set in Puerto Rico, which only my sister has read it because I didn't know what I was doing. I had this fun story idea, but I didn't know the craft of writing. And so I think you're so right in that I think we naturally gravitate at first as authors towards what we're familiar with and what we grew up reading. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, no, for sure. And similarly, I grew up reading mostly YA thrillers and mysteries from when I was basically in middle school, and I still read a ton, especially young adult thrillers now. Not so many mysteries anymore because I realize I love thrillers more than mysteries. They're similar, but they're different.
Yeah.
But for me, it's interesting because when I was starting my MFA program, and I had to figure out what I wanted to do for my thesis novel. I did a young adult mystery, and it had some psychological thriller elements, but it was very much there's a murder at the beginning and we had to figure out who did it. And it was very similar. Like, now that I'm really thinking about it, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sarah Shepard's books.
No.
She wrote Pretty Little Liars.
Okay.
But she has another series called The Lying Game. And that was like the series, like Sarah Shepard is the author that inspired me to want to write in the first place. And I actually got to meet her when she did a book signing at this author event near where I lived, like right after I started my MFA program, which was like really cool for me because I loved her growing up, and I still do. And The Lion Game is like the book that, or the series that really inspired me to write. And so now that I'm really thinking about that first book I wrote, it's so similar. Like, it's not a ripoff or a copy or anything, but it's like, it's super similar. And so not only looking at writing familiar genres, but I think sometimes in the early days too, before we can really come into ourselves as authors and have the new shiny ideas and be original, I think we tend to recycle things that we have read, even if we're not fully aware of doing that.
I agree. I agree. But then also, if we didn't have writing craft books, what would we do? We would just be reading and studying these books and like breaking them down and like kind of creating our own version of them, like to study anyway. So I agree 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So, shifting now into the unexpected and writing genres that we didn't expect to write. I know horror is obviously the main one for you, and it's one for me as well. It's fantasy. So, what made you go one day, maybe I'll write a young adult gothic horror novel?
Well, it was mainly accidental because I think you and I have talked about this. Like, I think we both kind of started out with like thriller type stories. And then I became interested in like fantasy stories. And then horror was somewhat intentional and somewhat accidental. Like a couple years ago, when I first got this idea for the story, like I could see that the horror genre was becoming quite popular, and I know I know people say don't write to trends, but I am one of the people that thinks like if you see something is becoming more popular, that might be a good thing. If you have a great story idea and you can produce somewhat quickly, that might be something to check out and see if it's a good fit for you. And so for me, that was part of it. But even when I started writing House of Hunger, I didn't really think of it fully as horror. It was my closest partner and writing friend who she was reading it and she's like, Michelle, you wrote a horror novel. And I was still kind of in denial. I was like, no, I don't think I did. It's not that scary.
Are you
And
kidding me?
she
I
was,
wanna read the first draft of this. I gotta read the first draft because come on.
oh my gosh, you read it. Demi was did a great developmental edit. You saw it twice.
Yeah.
So you know exactly what's in that story. Well, it actually got even scarier with each like revision I would make based off of feedback. And but I think this is the thing, and maybe you write horror stories too. It's not as scary when you are in control and when you are writing it because I mean, it still got my heart rate going, some of those scenes and the tension, but I knew what was happening and I could, whereas a reader does not know what's happening. And that's what's so thrilling and terrible about it. But so, yes, somewhat intentional, somewhat accidental. My thought too is like, I love genre blends, and I think you do too. Like, I love like fantasy, but kind of more grounded fantasy. So it has some fantastical elements, but it's like set in a familiar real place. And then also kind of suspenseful, I'd say kind of thriller elements too, with like propulsive pacing and a lot of tension and twists. Then romance and then plus horror. Like that's like my happy combination of different ingredients to put into a book. And so that's what I tried to do with House of Hunger.
Yeah, amazing. Lots of things to unpack there. The first thing is the unexpected nature of like not thinking it was horror and then recognizing, oh, I just wrote a horror novel. Oh, wow. And I think sometimes it can be that way when you write something and you're like, what is this? Like, what did I just do? And it was natural when you weren't even actively thinking, I'm writing a gothic horror novel. It just like happened that way naturally. And I think that's a really important thing to note because that's when you know that you found a genre that works for you. I think exploring different genres is great to grow as an author. That's what I do a lot of my short stories for anthologies. I've basically written every genre of short story rather than like high epic hard sci-fi. That's not my vibe, and I don't think I'd ever write like a science fiction story like that, but I've done dystopian and I've done everything else. And through writing other genres, I started to discover, oh, I kind of like writing romance, but like I probably wouldn't write a romance novel. But through writing romance short stories, I found that I'm able to write better romance subplots in my books. And then with horror, the very first horror short story I wrote was Revenge at Ravenwood, which you read. And
Yes.
that was the very first one. And after that, I was like, oh my god, like every single time I saw an anthology submission call for horror, I had to do it. And now that's my favorite short story genre to write. And I think like your point about blending genres as well is so true because my current work in progress is a gothic thriller. So thriller is the main genre, but horror is 100% the subgenre. And had I not written all those horror short stories, I wouldn't have wanted to do that and I wouldn't have discovered my love for horror elements and gothic elements. And so trying different genres on a smaller scale and also reading outside your typical genre will give you a wider scope of what's out there, and you could possibly discover something to write that you didn't think you would want to write had you not explored other things.
100%. I totally agree. And I think there's so many different like reader types out there. I know for me, it's funny you mentioned the romance thing. I don't see myself ever writing like a straight, like just romance story. But I do love having a romantic subplot, even if it's in a horror novel. I had some beta readers say that they loved Duke Lugo in my story. I added more of him since you
Thank
read it.
you so much.
And but the comment was, and this kind of applies in my mind to a lot of genre blends, especially horror. I had people comment that like he was like the bright light in a dark story. And even going into his POV gave them a break from the oppressiveness of Cora's situation in the house. And having a love story and like kind of this blossoming romance also is like it's kind of like a treat, like to entice people into what is they know is going to be a scary story. But if you give them these rewards, these enjoyable aspects to it too, true, some people just enjoy the horror. But for me, I need the fun things. I need a romantic subplot and I need like just things that will entice me to read a story that maybe generally I wouldn't without those ingredients. And I know that's true because I had so many beta readers and some of my later beta readers when I made revisions for my agent, they read it and they were like, I don't read horror, but I loved this and I loved the romance. I loved the love story to it and Duke Lugo. And like they were able to get through the more horrifying bits because I was rewarding them with things that they would normally gravitate towards in a story. So that's kind of my strategy. It's like I'm writing it for me because I know give me the good stuff too. Um, but I even had a sweet friend on Twitter. I think she's a pastor's wife, and she was like, I don't read this kind of story. Like, I don't read horror, but I love the snippets that you shared online on Twitter. And I would love to read your story. And I was like, I am so honored that someone is like, kind of out of their comfort zone and they're willing to do that and go on this adventure with me.
Yeah.
And that's like my goal with it. I think there's so many variations of like horror novels, but I love that blend of fantasy, propulsive, and horror elements all in one to maybe attract more readers than just someone who mainly just reads horror.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that's interesting as well because if you are blending genres in an effective way, and obviously the book can sit in a certain genre for market reasons, but you pull readers to your story based on certain tropes, certain elements, things like that. And there's so many books that even just like Amethyst Ink manuscripts that
Mhm.
like, one coming to mind is it was like a historical dark academia vibe, and I don't read historical, but, like, I love the dark academia stuff, I love the light it had, like, some light magic-y elements, and this author actually recently got a deal, I saw it in Publishers Marketplace recently, and I almost cried because that was the first time I unexpectedly was just, like, reading Pub Lunch, and, like, there was a book title of, like, a book I edited, and I was like, "Duh." But, like, that was, like, a perfect one where I was like, I don't read historical, but I gotta read this. And like that was like it was so good. And like that's a perfect example of like unexpected, like blending unexpected elements that maybe you wouldn't necessarily see mashed up together or blending the familiar with the unexpected and hooking a reader with something that they love and something that's familiar to them, but then introducing this new element that maybe they have never read. Like, for example, like maybe they love horror, but they've never read a horror like yours before with this like romantic thread woven through, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I love this. I wanna read more books like this now." And so combining the familiar with the unfamiliar is also something great that we can do as authors.
I love that. Well, and that was part of my strategy too, is like kind of taking classic horror. I think I told you, and I tell people, but like I'm kind of a scaredy cat. Like people talk about popular horror books and horror movies that they consume now, and I'm like, I haven't read or seen a lot of it because I prefer like the classics, like Poe and Jackson, or Hitchcock movies. Like there's something so artistic about how those were created, and I tend to gravitate towards them. And then I love, like, taking inspiration from those and then putting, like, a fresh twist to it, and, like, a really atmospheric and unexpected location is, like, definitely becoming my author brand, I think.
Yes, amazing. So something else I want to talk about briefly is this idea of pulling like this idea that we were talking about with the familiar and the unfamiliar when you're writing. If you're trying something new, it's okay to stick with something that's familiar too, just so you're not completely in this very uncomfortable space. And like, even if you're subconsciously doing it, like, I think a good example of this is when I write my fantasies, they totally have thriller subplots because thriller is my main genre. That's where I started. And I tried for Flurry, my gemstone one. I initially wanted to make that cozy fantasy, and when I was talking to my friends about it, they're like, "There's no way you're gonna be able to do this. Like, you're such a thriller girl, like, there's no way." And, like, when I started writing it, like, it definitely had the thriller subplot, and that's something Sarah told me too. Like, she was like, "I wanna read your thriller because I can tell that you write thrillers just from the fantasy that it's not a thriller. It just had such a strong suspenseful element to it." And so that's one of the things too where, like, fantasy is less of a familiar genre for me, but pulling in something so familiar like the suspense, the thriller elements, the mystery, the clues, all of that, it made it feel familiar even though it had this whole other world, this whole magic system, all this folklore, and it still felt familiar to me.
I love that. See, and I think that readers love that too. Yes, bringing that familiar element to it, but then, like, taking a thriller concept and then like adding fantastical like vampires and then putting it in like a crazy cool setting. I feel like that's kind of the formula for some of the successful books is like bringing in familiar and unexpected and something really fresh.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, for any authors who are like eager to step outside their comfort zones and write an unexpected genre, but they're maybe hesitant to do so, what advice would you have for them?
I think before you write, read something. Like if you're always reading and writing fantasy, maybe pick up some thrillers or like I don't read a ton of horror, but I intentionally picked up some horror so that I could familiarize myself with some of the popular books in that. And one that I thought was so interesting was Grady Hendrix' How to Sell a Haunted House is a book that I normally would not pick up, but oh my goodness, it is so intense and it is so interesting. And so, like, I think sometimes just reading something outside of your comfort zone can be the best way to learn and see what elements you like and study those before you start trying to create something yourself. But I love your idea of taking something familiar that you love and then add the kind of old and familiar with something new and fresh. And then you're creating something new from that.
I love what you said about just reading and immersing yourself into different genres and writing styles and things. And that's something I feel really grateful for from my MFA program because when we had critique sessions at residencies, we were basically put in groups and we had to read the opening pages of several authors' submissions, and they were all genres. So, like, I would read a fantasy, and then I'd be reading, like, a YA contemporary, and then an adult thriller, so I was constantly reading different stuff. And with Amethyst Ink now too, like, anytime I get sent a manuscript, like, I don't know what it's gonna be. I can be reading a middle grade fantasy, and then next week I'm reading an adult thriller, and then I'm reading a young adult horror, so I'm constantly being given different things. And that's such a privilege, I feel like, because I'm reading so many different things. And also beyond like understanding different genres and finding elements and things that you may like to bring into your own writing. I just think it's an appreciation of publishing as a whole. Like, we should all be supporting each other and lifting each other up and reading each other's work. And if you stay in one genre and you're only reading thrillers and that's all you're going to read, you're missing out on a ton of other amazing books. And so I think it's just being a good literary citizen too, and just, allowing yourself to see what your peers are writing and publishing.
Oh, exactly. Well, in one of the critique groups I was in, I've been in many, and that's, I think, a huge part of why I've grown as a writer. But it's interesting. You could have someone writing, like you said, totally different genres, but then someone writing like more of a cozy, sweet teen romance or something. Um, that was the author who was like encouraging me on deepening my characters. So there's always they'll point out aspects to your story that you're naturally not going to like identify as weaknesses and things that you can improve. And so I think having like a wide array of different types of beta readers and critique partners who read different genres, I think is such a great idea.
Yeah, amazing. Well, we're running down to the end of our chat. Gotta leave room for the plot twist.
No, I have been stressing, like literally stressing. This is my horror story.
But before we do that, what final thoughts do you have to share on writing unexpected genres? That's such a tongue twister. Why can't I say that properly? Writing unexpected genres.
I can't either. I feel like again, it's reading, but also I think I've realized this recently when I was kind of in a little bit of a slump. Consume other forms of media. Like I read so much more than I watch movies and TV, and I don't listen to music when I'm writing. But even just in this past week alone, I was listening to a lot of music and it was inspiring something for one of my works in progress. And then I had this movie I kept thinking about, and I finally just put it on. And like it refills that creative well. So I think sometimes we limit ourselves just to reading books because we're writers. But I think there's so many other things that can inspire us and give us ideas. So that would be one of my recommendations is just kind of get out of like the little writing cave or the writing box and open yourself up to different inspiration.
Perfect advice. Amazing note to end on for that part of our chat. And now we made it to your plot twist. Here we go. Are you ready?
No. Like I'm so not ready.
All right, here we go. So, you are hosting a horror themed dinner party, and you're planning a 5-course meal, and all the courses are horror related. You can make them as absolutely gross as you would like to. So, I'm going to have you tell me what the appetizer, soup, salad, main course, and dessert are. Let's start with the appetizer.
Oh my gosh. Uh, um, like an olive platter with but like stuffed olives with like the pimentos and maybe some green olives stuffed with feta cheese and a pimento. Like make them look like eyeballs
Oh, good.
with toothpicks right there through them.
Amazing. All right, what's the soup?
Tomato soup, of course, but like with food coloring to make it extra bloody. I can't believe I'm saying this.
Oh my god. All right, salad.
Oh no. I don't know for salad. What's creepy? Um, I don't know. Girl, you got me on this one. Can I come back to salad?
Yeah, what about the main course?
Uh, I don't know. I feel like you've got to have some kind of steak. Um, Fine lobster. I feel like lobster could be creepy
Yeah,
because
that's
it's like the
good.
whole crustacean, and
Yeah.
especially if people are having to like crack it with those like lethal like metal instruments or a mallet. Like, this is so good.
Perfect. And how about the dessert?
Hmm. I don't know, maybe, like, this sounds all innocent, but, like, bananas Foster, something that you have to light on fire
Oh,
at the
good.
table. That's my
I like that.
that's mine. Girl, I can't think of a salad. I think we're gonna skip the salad and just double up on something else.
Alright, okay, how about we'll replace the salad with a drink? What's the drink?
Oh, like a Bloody Mary? Like, that
That's the
has to
correct
be like,
answer.
but
That's the
it's
right
so
answer.
cliche, it's so cliche. I
That's the
feel
right
like I should come up.
answer.
Okay, we'll go with the Bloody Mary. Like, doesn't this sound creepy? You've got flames and mallets and, like, eyeballs.
If you ever have this horror dinner party, please invite me.
I will. Did you know I host murder mystery parties? At
Oh,
least
what?
I did.
Nuh-uh.
I love them, and this is, like, giving me ideas.
Look at that. Amazing. Perfect. Are you feeling better now? Was it as scary as you thought it would be?
Yes, it was. You gave me, like, the 5 part there were so many pieces to it. You know what? I'm going to be thinking tonight as I'm trying to go to sleep, I'll think of the perfect salad, and I'm gonna DM you.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining me. Can you please share with everybody where they can connect with you online?
I am the most active on Twitter. So people can find me on Twitter at Sanchez_M_M. I also have a like low key author website that I have linked on my Twitter profile.
Perfect. Well, thank you for joining me. It was so lovely finally having you on the show.
I am so glad to do it. Thank you, Demi.
You're so welcome. And listeners, that's a wrap on this chapter with Michelle, all about writing unexpected genres. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. If you did, please consider leaving Literary Blend a review and giving it 5 stars to help others just like you discover it. Also, if you have friends in publishing who you think would enjoy the show too, please pass it along to them. Thanks for listening, and until we flip to the next chapter, happy reading and writing.